again, you're punishing, and even though I've heard that it said it's not banning, it's prohibiting, and then you've got a punishment on top of that. So I $2.5 billion in revenue for African hair products, stylists, barbers, all kinds of things. And so you have to be diverse. You have to know diversity in order to work in that marketplace, because just the texture of your hair, it's different. You can pretend, it's ignorant. We don't need diversity. I forget what the language was. It's divisive. It's actually inclusion. It gives you information. If you're in business and you're selling to people of color, or matter of fact, anyone, white people, you go to the salon, your hair is different. My friend says her hair is thin. She wanted some product or something. You can encourage matter of fact, the whole body to reject this amendment. It's not helpful. It does nothing for us.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Collins for opening remarks, Amendment H1094.
I move the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Collins moves Amendment H1094. All division and record have been requested by Representative Confers, second by Representative Mattson. This is now a record roll call vote. Clerk, open machine, CV vote. Srinivas votes no. Kaufman votes aye. Nordman votes aye. Golding votes aye. Hayes votes aye. Meyer-Webster votes aye. Holt votes aye. Moore-Scott votes aye. Have you all now voted? Clerk, close the machine. The House may attention results of the vote. Those voting aye, 61. No, 37. Absent or not voting, 2. The amendment is adopted. That disposes of all amendments. We are now on discussion on House File 856. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the chair recognizes. Oh, sorry. Chair recognizes Representative Wilburn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I do rise in opposition to this bill. It is even more broad and expansive, dictating to local entities on how they go about addressing needs in their community, whether that being hiring staff, allowing private funds, or establishing grants to support some of those efforts, asserting the Attorney General in those efforts, which limit the ability of local government and schools to address, support diversity, equity, inclusion. To allow them to enhance their programming. I'm thinking of some of the cities in the Des Moines metro area that have officers to make sure that their employees are aware of the communities within their cities that represent different cultures, different race, gender, veteran status, others, and while the word veteran is not included in here, most diversity, equity, inclusion programs look at what makes us who we are in a variety of different ways. This has already had a stifling effect. I referred to some of these. Some of you missed my point of personal privilege yesterday If you think back, those who heard it, I mentioned that my colleagues and I are going to be expressing legitimate concerns expressed to us and what we've also seen in our communities, what we've seen in some of your communities. I also gave you the heads up that some may describe what our concerns as a parade of horribles. Iowans are bringing this up to us. Iowans are not talking about a parade of horribles. There have been adjustments in other government entities, including our state. I mentioned yesterday about the Iowa Army National Guard being given a directive from the Department of Defense to review its social media practices to give notice to the public, which they did back in February. I got a copy of the letter of that order from the Department of Defense. I've also seen it reports by Media Investigations Associated Press confirming from Department of Defense in Washington, D.C., officials and staff about images that have been removed, that had been targeted for removal, including the Enola Gay aircraft, because the search was done for the word gay and that showed up. I didn't make that up. I don't lie. I pull from examples that Iowans bring up to me. It's not to exaggerate. It's to point out that bills such as this that are broad, and even though there's been conversation over several years about the value of diversity, equity, inclusion or not, these are legitimate concerns. And so please keep an open mind, ask members of the public to continue to express your concern about us embracing diversity, about having local governments have the opportunity to see to the needs in their communities, to make sure that they are able to promote, have staff provide private funds, offer grants to support all of us. And part of equity and inclusion beyond race, but it's all part of that diverse make of who we are. That problems can be addressed, that our local governments can, without interference from the state, make sure that we are enhancing, embracing, celebrating diversity, making sure that all of us are aware if we are discriminating, make sure that all of us are aware when we are creating opportunities that helps lift all of us. I again ask you to, those who were present for my conversation, to just apply those thoughts to this particular item. Again, we are not lying. We are not making it up. It's fair to ask for confirmation. That was done, and some representatives on your side of the aisle did one question about who or what number. A number was provided. So be it, but I ask that you not belittle the concerns of Iowans. Make sure that local government is able to address these needs as they see fit.
Chair recognizes Representative Mattson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen of the House. You know, just a little while ago, Representative Holt mentioned that it's important to talk about definitions in bills, and so I think it is really important that we do that in this one. Given that, would Representative Stone yield to a few questions?
Will the representative yield?
I will not.
Wow. It's my understanding that Representative Stone is the floor manager on this bill. Can someone could just confirm that for me? Is Representative Stone the floor manager for this bill? Yes? Okay. Well, then let me tell the room, I guess, what I was going to ask Representative Stone. And I have to say I'm really disappointed because when I asked Representative Stone a number of questions in committee, he seemed more than happy to defend his bill. And I guess on the floor, that's not where we're going to do it. So here's what I was going to ask Representative Stone. I'll skip ahead. I was going to, first of all, read a couple definitions from the bill. So talking about definitions, here is part of the definition for diversity, equity, and inclusion, according to this bill, mind you. Any effort to promote as the official position of the state entity a particular widely contested opinion referencing unconscious or implicit bias, cultural appropriation, allyship, transgender ideology, microaggressions, group marginalization, anti-racism, systemic oppression, social justice, intersectionality, neo-pronouns, which quite frankly I didn't even know was a word, heteronormativity, disparate impact, gender theory, racial privilege, sexual privilege, or any related formulation of these concepts. So, since I don't have anyone to actually answer my questions, I'll ask it rhetorically. How do we define widely contested opinion? How is widely contested opinion to be measured? Will the Department of Education need to conduct a poll on this? People change their opinions all the time. Will the legislature know if it is still widely contested? And the other question I have relates to the part of the definition all the way down at the end with, it says, or any related formulation of these concepts. Folks, that seems pretty broad. How is that going to be determined? Any related formulation of these concepts? Will it be worked out in rules, as I'm often told in debate? Is it going to be figured out when people start suing through the civil actions allowed under this bill? It's unfortunate that the floor manager is unwilling to defend his bill through questions today. So let's talk about the real definitions for a clear understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are from the dictionary. Diversity means recognizing and valuing differences in all areas such as abilities, socioeconomic status, learning styles, and more. Here's an example. A classroom where students with different learning styles, perhaps visual or auditory, are given various ways to engage with the material to help them succeed. Equity focuses on ensuring that everyone has the resources and support they need to reach their full potential. For example, providing extra tutoring or support for a student who is struggling with reading to ensure they don't fall behind, even if others don't need that support. Inclusion is about creating an environment where everyone feels respected, valued, and able to contribute regardless of their backgrounds or needs. For example, adapting classroom activities so that students with physical disabilities can participate in all activities alongside their peers. So I think it's important to mention that Ankeny Community School District, where I am proud to represent and have 2 children in the public schools, has a chief diversity officer. According to our superintendent, his work is done in collaboration with district departments, aligns with the strategic plan, which focuses on rigorous academics, quality staff, and providing supportive environments that foster students' academic success. And I just want to take a couple minutes to share some of the great programs that he has facilitated. His name is Ken Morris Jr., for the record. The Youth Conference on Healthy Relationships. He was also a presenter. Ankeny Community School District middle and high school students who are looking for guidance on building healthy relationships and staying safe were invited to the Youth Conference on Healthy Relationships. Youth connected with experts and fellow teens who are passionate about restoring hope, building futures, and making a difference. This opportunity was co-sponsored by Big Brothers Big Sisters, Children and Families of Iowa, and Investing in My Future. And something that I think is incredibly important that our school district does is called MVPs. It's the Mentors in Violence Prevention. I think that we can all agree that violence prevention is kind of a big deal and a good thing. November 11th, 2024, the Ankeny Community School District hosted its first all-district MVP retreat, which stands for Mentors in Violence Prevention, I said. Nearly 400 students were in attendance from our 8 through 12 buildings. The aim of the retreat was to create camaraderie and connections in our MVP mentor groups, to build confidence in presenting, to learn classroom management and engagement strategies, to feel empowered as leaders, and to feel ownership to create a culture in our schools that is safe, kind, inclusive, where everyone has a rightful presence to be there, and to have fun. The communications team co-sponsored the event with the help of the MVP coordinators, and in addition, communications was able to record a series of PSAs from the student MVP mentors that will be shared with 6th through 7th grade students to be a positive influence on topics such as gossiping, building healthy habits, choosing friends wisely, and the importance of getting involved at school. Finally, a capacity grant. Through a collaboration between the Patricia Thompson Center for Violence Prevention and Ankeny Community School District, they are applying for a capacity building grant to support the MVP program in their schools. The Orbis project-based experience in Ankeny schools is a unique opportunity for students to gain hands-on real-world experience while also making a meaningful impact on their school and local community. By focusing on analyzing school data and using it to create social messaging in support of the MVP program, students are not only learning critical skills in data analytics and marketing, but also engaging in an important initiative aimed at improving school culture and supporting violence prevention efforts. Skills development and violence prevention. Sounds kind of noteworthy to me. And to be clear, because of this bill's ban on grant funding related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's possible this project would not be able to move forward. I have a long list from my superintendent of all the ways in which our Chief Diversity Officer has made a difference in our school district and for our students. But I'll end with this fact. Ankeny Chamber of Commerce Employee of the Year, Ken Morris Jr. Presented by 2023 awardee Tony Mills, the 2024 Employee of the Year award was given to Kenneth Morris Jr. This recognition celebrates a dedicated chamber member employee who makes a significant impact in our community. Kenneth Morris Jr. has made an extraordinary impact as Chief Diversity Officer for the Ankeny Community School District. His dedication to fostering an inclusive environment ensures that every student feels seen, valued, and empowered to succeed. His leadership and passion extend beyond his role, shaping a culture of support and belonging for students, families, and colleagues alike. I don't know how anyone in this chamber, quite honestly, can hear these achievements and not value them, or recognize the benefit for the students and their community. I think I'm known by a lot of folks to be a pretty even-keeled person. I know it may not always seem like that on the floor. I do my best, still pretty even-keeled. But I will be incredibly honest and say that my heart breaks today for Ankeny students, for my school district, and for everyone impacted by this bill. Friends and neighbors of the House, Iowans deserve better than made-up definitions and continued fear-mongering.
Chair recognizes the representative from Polk, Representative Kahn first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the House. My colleagues are speaking eloquently about parts of the bill that they don't like here, and I'm appreciative of that. I'm going to focus on the Iowa tuition grant portion of this bill, not surprisingly to many of you. I'd like to take this moment to say how proud I am to lead a caucus where we're all proud of amendments and legislation we put forward, and happy to speak about it. We have 9,000 Iowa students who currently receive the Iowa tuition grant. And what this bill will do is punish students who choose to go to a school that doesn't agree with your politics. Okay? So what that means is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, in your opinion, causes damage. I understand that. I hear from you. It makes people feel less welcome, makes people feel attacked, makes people feel sort of divided. Okay? Fair enough. That's an opinion. I disagree. Perhaps the Board of Trustees at a private university in this state disagrees as well. Why are we, the legislature, punishing children and young people who want to go to college by telling them they can't pick a college that has a position that's different than yours? That is not fair, and it is not right. When we're looking at where students want to go to college, we are telling them what they can and cannot get in terms of support based on what you think the school shouldn't provide, the private school. Okay, I've got more to say that in a moment, but imagine if the roles were reversed. Imagine if today, if we were in charge tomorrow, it'll take a little longer than that, but imagine that we were in charge tomorrow. And we said, we will not allow someone to go to a private institution in this state that teaches Christianity. You'd be blowing your minds. Because it's a private institution and they should be able to teach what they want to teach, and the family should be able to use the resources to go there and teach it. But you say these are state dollars. I agree. And if we can't make K-12 institutions give us any accountability when they're receiving $1 billion in state funding over 5 years, one would think that you would also scoff at this, because it is no different. Except that in K-12, those kids are required to be there, and it's a lot more money. So what else are we going to tell private businesses in this state that they can or cannot do? A private business gets a tax credit. Are we going to tell them what they can and cannot do? Again, if you're in charge, you're probably fine with that. But what if the roles were reversed? And we started telling private businesses what they could and couldn't do if they received tax credits or other money regarding politics or political opinions. I don't think you would be happy. We hear a lot of talk about people feeling attacked, feeling left out. No one wants that. That is why an organization, an institution that considers and discusses diversity, equity, and inclusion allows for open discussion of these things to happen. We hear a lot about the importance of having different ideas. In fact, we've got a whole bill coming up about how we need a college devoted to those ideas, to different ideas. So if we think that's so important, why are we taking away the opportunity to have important conversations on campus about diversity, equity, and inclusion? I understand that some people do feel targeted by these, especially by the way they've been portrayed versus the way that they're actually being implemented. But I would say this: if some people feel attacked and insulted by these bills, or by these programs, imagine how the students who feel erased because of this bill feel, right? I have a student who has contacted me from a different university to tell me that she feels like her experience is being erased because her institution is not allowed to talk about her experience and how it's different from someone else's because of how she looks and how she was born. That's not a parade of horribles, that's Sarah. Sarah feels attacked and eliminated. I don't want anyone to feel that way. So why not allow discussion? Why not allow critical thinking? Why not allow us to have these conversations in our institutions rather than shutting us up and telling us you don't like these political thoughts, so therefore no one can have them? It simply blows my mind that we are here telling private organizations and businesses what they can and cannot do, and we're punishing the students who get those grants. I am a proud Iowa tuition grant recipient from a bazillion years ago. And I know that I was grateful to have the opportunity to attend any private institution in this state with that Iowa tuition grant. I didn't have to follow a checklist or see if they agreed with the Republican or Democratic majority in the legislature. I got to trust the people who run that institution to run it the way they know how to run it because they're the experts. I am so sorry that 9,000 students in the state of Iowa might have that opportunity taken away because you don't like the politics of their institution. Vote no.
Chair recognizes the representative from Johnson, Representative Levin.
Thank you. I see there's been a change in chairmanship since I put my light on. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues of the House. A few thoughts to share on this one. I am very proud, as you might have noticed, of my home. I am very proud to have made Iowa my home. It is a decision I did not take lightly because when I moved to Iowa as a kid who grew up in Illinois, I was embarrassed to tell people I was coming here because I didn't know anything about Iowa except corn and, to be fair, Field of Dreams, which I loved. So when I came here and attended a private college where I did not benefit from the Iowa tuition grant because I was an out-of-state student, I really was impressed and surprised, and I fell in love. And so when we make it harder for students to make this place their home, when we make it harder for communities to embrace those who come and join us and become Iowans, wow, people are just fleeing for the doors. It's fascinating. It really breaks my heart. When we make it harder for Iowans to achieve their potential here in Iowa, it breaks my heart. I want to start by taking some information from the Society for Human Resource Management. I'm trying to stay very level-headed. I'm trying to stay very nonpartisan on this particular idea because this is a charged topic, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It means different things to different people, clearly. We've heard a lot of different definitions in here today. And so one of the groups that have been kind of talking my ear off about their concerns about all of these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion is human resources professionals. Folks whose job is making sure that jobs run smoothly, that people are successful and supported at work, and that colleagues are able to move along and get along together, so that everyone who is qualified and everyone who has the aptitude can work in their chosen field. And some of the demographic data that SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Managers, recommends be included in considerations for diversity, equity, and inclusion are age, disability, ethnicity or national origin, family status, gender identity or expression, generation, language, life experiences, organization function and level, again, this is coming from the business world, personality type, physical characteristics, race, religion, belief, and spirituality, sexual orientation, learning style, and veteran status. So when those of us who are voicing concerns say that we have concerns about all of these things, this is why. Putting a definition that conflicts with a definition elsewhere in code into each bill that's different from the one we just talked about in the previous or two ago bill doesn't change the fact that the real world has to interact with the laws we make in this place. And so if the real world includes all of these things in the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, if the business community includes all of these things in the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, if the educational world includes all of these things in the definition, then it seems salient to consider all of these things when we consider limiting access to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Particularly, I am personally concerned about the impacts of this bill on local civil and human rights commissions. I want to talk a little bit about the duties of the Iowa City Human Rights Commission. Their duties include disseminating information to educate the public on illegal discrimination and civil rights, such as organizing and facilitating educational public forums that address one or more of the broad range of topics included within the rubric of human rights. They are responsible for, the duties also include making recommendations to the City Council for further legislation concerning discrimination if it's deemed necessary and desirable. They are responsible for cooperating within the limits of any appropriations made for the Human Rights Commission's operation with other agencies, other organizations, both public and private, whose purposes are not inconsistent with those of the Human Rights Ordinance within my city. And their duties include planning programs and activities designed to eliminate racial, religious, cultural, and other intergroup tensions, including but not limited to sex, color, creed, disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, marital status, age, and national origin. One of our other illustrious civil rights commissions in the state has as its charge to receive and investigate discrimination complaints, formulate a comprehensive education program to eliminate discrimination, and recommend ways to discourage prejudice. All of these things sound pretty close to in line with what are the stated goals of this body. But as we've already discussed, the bill has an unwieldy definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion that literally uses the word opinion and any related formulation of these concepts. So the bill explicitly includes human rights commissions and civil rights commissions. These commissions have staff who are assigned to support their work. Those staff require funds. This bill eliminates those staff. There are many reasons to be concerned with the implementation of this bill. I only choose to highlight this one. But I do think it's important when talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion to all be on the same page, all be on the same definition. Putting a different definition in every bill on the topic doesn't change what we're talking about. We're talking about people's ability to be treated equitably and to be included regardless of what makes us different. I would appreciate your consideration of a no vote on this bill.
Chair recognizes the representative from Polk, Representative Gaines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, you know when you're a child, you have a lot of precious memories with your family. I'm an only child, and so the three of us, my mom, my dad, and I, would always eat breakfast in the morning together before my dad and mom went to work and I went to school. I was only 8 years old, but I vividly remember my father reading a story about a woman whose name was Rosa Parks, and she had sat down in her seat on a bus, a city bus, instead of getting up and giving her seat to a white man. And because of that, she was arrested. That disturbed me a lot, first of all, because I couldn't understand why she had to get up while others sat down, and I didn't know why she was arrested. Well, as you all know, as you know history, this finally resolved itself in a civil rights movement. First, a bus boycott for a year, and then a civil rights movement which lasted from 1956 until the late 60s. During that time, because I was so emotionally involved, I learned all the incidents of the civil rights movement through the Voting Act, the Civil Rights Act, and the death of Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968. I was 21 at that time, and because of so much happening in our country, I was able to receive one of the many scholarships that were created for minority students. And I can proudly say that I did not spend a cent on my college education. I received a scholarship for minority students for undergraduate school, and I received part of a grant that was written for minority students for graduate people. So I really benefited from it. After I graduated, I really wanted to do something that would make this country a better place, that would pull people together and help them understand and want to spread that understanding. In addition to getting a job as a drama teacher at East High School, a few years after that, and doing so much with diversity in the classroom, I was invited to be a diversity trainer. So yes, I am a diversity trainer for Heartland Education Agency in Johnston. And that was in 1979. So for the last 46 years, I have developed courses in diversity for Heartland AEA, and I've traveled all over the country as a diversity trainer. California, Tennessee, Maryland, Illinois, Wisconsin, Kansas, Missouri, and on and on and on. I've created about 20 courses in diversity for Heartland: African American culture, Asian culture, Latino culture, LGBTQ issues, and again, on and on and on. My courses are always very popular. They're the first ones to fill on the Heartland class list, and I not only teach people from central Iowa, people from around the state and also states close to us come to take a part in my diversity classes. I've been very proud of the work I have done. And 46 years as a diversity trainer is a long, long time. Recently, I was contacted by the director of Heartland saying that she was very afraid of the courses that I offer. Not because of the courses or the content of the courses, but the attitude in our state, the growing attitude against diversity, equity, and inclusion. She still doesn't know if I'm going to be able to offer my courses, but she challenged me to change the word diversity, which I couldn't understand. Well, I do understand it. I just didn't think it was fair. And in rewriting every daggone course that I've created to take out the word diversity, equity, and inclusion, the words. I think that's totally unfair, and I think it's misunderstood, not only in this state, but around the country. For 60 years now, I have watched and adhered to race relations growing in this country, getting better, diversity being recognized, teachers that I taught, learning different cultures so that they could make a welcoming environment for their students. Nothing has ever happened to go against me or the work that I've done, and I've received high accolades. And yet, because of a few misunderstood words, I have to rewrite all of my courses. That saddens me. It saddens me because most of my life I worked to celebrate diversity, to appreciate people who were different, and to value that we are all more alike than we are different. Yes, things are changing quickly, and it saddens me because I feel that I am going to leave this world thinking that all the work that I have done is going to be eliminated. I know some of you don't understand this. The little brief history that I gave, some of you weren't even alive when these things are happening. So how could you possibly see them from my point of view? But I'm asking you to trust me. A lot of work has been put into helping people understand differences and to appreciate our country for who we are. And we stand to lose it all of it. That's a shame. That's a downright shame. No from Ruth Ann Gaines on this vote.
Chair recognizes the representative from Blackhawk, Representative Brown Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to figure out why these three words scare us, scare you. Diversity enriches our environment by bringing together individuals with unique backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences. Equity ensures that everyone has a fair access to opportunity and resources. I'll repeat it, everyone. Inclusion is about creating a culture where all individuals feel valued, respected, and heard. So who in this room does not want to feel valued, be respected, or be heard? We all want this. So one might ask, and I ask, what in the hell are we doing today?
Chair recognizes the representative from Blackhawk, Representative Amos Jr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, good afternoon. For me, I just want to thank all of my colleagues for providing the information necessary so that everyone in this room understands what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. What I want to do is I want to talk to you all about the impact that diversity, equity, and inclusion has had in my life. I'm a 70-year-old man, started working when I was the age of 19. Went to college for a little while, got a full ride scholarship to play at Upper Iowa in football, got injured. My scholarship was taken away, so I knew that I was going to have to come back to my hometown of Waterloo, Iowa, and go to work. Many different places to work. The place that I started working at was a small factory that made Craftsman toolboxes. Paid a little bit of money, but as a young man who was going into a grocery store cashing my check, there were other individuals that were coming in cashing their checks from a larger manufacturing facility. Now, when I would watch them having their money counted out, and then I would go and get mine counted out, it was a lot less money. And my wife was 7 months pregnant at the time, and I knew I needed more money to provide for my family. So what ended up happening was my mother-in-law, who was a Caucasian woman, was working in a cafe across from this larger manufacturing facility. And this is a story that she was telling me. Working there, the head of HR for this manufacturing facility came in to get lunch. And she asked him, what does it take for me to get hired at this manufacturing facility? Now, keep in mind, this was in 1974. And my mother-in-law said that this guy told her, I can't hire you, you're too short and fat. Now, in this day and age, we wouldn't be able to say that, but back then they could. Well, she said, well, what about my son-in-law? And this individual did not know that I was a black man. So the next thing that happened was at that time, there was a line 2 blocks long of individuals trying to get into this facility to go to work. Stood in line like everyone else. And when I got to the front of the line, my name was on a list. Well, at that time, this place would not hire you if you were working for someone else. And I found this out. So what I did is I beat over to this place where I was working. Keep in mind, I had a year-in wife, 7 months pregnant. And I told them I wanted a pink slip because I have an opportunity to get into a place where I can make more money. Are you sure you want to do that? Yes, definitely. So the time for my interview came. I went into this office of the HR person, and he sat me down, And the only question that he asked me was, do you learn fast? Now, this is a manufacturing facility. I had no experience or anything else. Do you learn fast? What are you going to say? No. And I said yes. But I knew that the reason that I was hired was because I was a black man. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. For me, I ended up in a department, they called it the retirement department. All older white gentlemen, and most people who look like me didn't end up in a machining environment. They ended up in the foundry. But you know what happened? Those individuals took me under their wing, and they taught me, and I learned, and I figured out what I needed to do in order to maintain that job. But I was trained. No, I didn't have any experience. And to say that, what I'm saying is diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that, if I did not have that, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you right now. And it's important that everyone in this room understand that when you take this away, you're taking it away from my grandkids also. And if it was your grandkids, you'd be fighting like heck. I won't say what Brown Power said, but you'd be fighting like heck to make sure that these things did not happen in your life. You know, my sons, I have a son who's 50, soon to be 51, one is 46, and one is 43. And when I raised those young men, the one thing that I informed them is you have to understand, sons, you are black men. And even though there is equality, there is not equity. And what you have to understand is you are going to have to do even more than that other individual who is going to be working beside you to get there. That's a fact of life. If you don't believe me, it's the truth. And I have many instances that I could give you to where it has happened to me, to where I had to do more in order to be equal. So what I'm saying is to all of you, if you pass this, you are going to be doing harm to a lot more than people who just look like me. You know, I look at this room. I see all of these women in here. Well, I had someone look up back in 1975, how many women were in this room? In the House, there were 10. Now there's 27. And if you think that diversity, equity, and inclusion was not a part of you being here, do the research. Because it impacts more than just people who look like me. And understand, yes, it is something that was put in place so that everyone had a fair opportunity. Don't take that opportunity away, please. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the lady from Polk, Representative Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise because this bill is harmful and mean-spirited. It is completely void of beneficial outcomes. It is one of several bills that tries to eliminate diversity in any form. At the same time, we are trying here in Iowa to recruit people of diverse skills and talents and innovative ideas. What a contradiction. But then you know that. When we do the same thing with the same people, using the same language and the same cultural experiences, you get the same wrong answer. This has been diversity, equity, inclusion has been called divisive. This arena is divisive. And to put the stigma on the words diversity, equity, and inclusion by framing it like somebody's forced to do it and it's going to hurt you in some way, as opposed to you're learning a skill. You're going to use that in your business, in your home, in your interactions with other people, diverse people, our constituents. And so I can't make you understand it, but I do want to leave you with this word. I want you to own the fact that you are against diversity, equity, and inclusion. The words, the meaning, not some concoction that will propel this bill to the finish line, but the real essence of the word. And when someone asks you, be proud to tell them, I'm against diversity, a diverse group of people, or our country, our time. There's so many things that are diverse, but own it. Be responsible for it. The same thing with equity. I'm against equity and justice and all the other trappings that come with it. And inclusion. Nope, I'm not interested in that either. I don't want to include people. I don't want to include topics. I don't want, whatever the gamut is. But own those things. In addition, when we leave this place, and no matter what you say, we will still be strong people because we are equipped. We have learned about diversity. We know inclusion and equity, and we fight for it. And we will continue to fight for it regardless of what comes up. And I hope at some time and place you'll be able to fight for it, knowing that it's a gem worth fighting for. So that concludes what I have to say to you today. I know that words matter. Diversity, equity, inclusion matters. And you don't need to put something else around it. Just know that it's important to many people. It's not just an idea. It's not just somebody's opinion. It's important. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Dubuque, Representative James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, friends and neighbors of the House. At one point in history, Black people were considered property, enslaved. At one point in history, Black people were considered 3/5 of a person. At one point in history, Black people were denied bathrooms, water fountains, told where they could sit on a bus. At one point in history, women didn't have the right to vote, couldn't open up a line of credit on their own. At one point in our history, Americans of Japanese ethnicity were put in internment camps. And let us not forget that at one point in history, an entire religious group was rounded up. Men, women, children, and sent to gas chambers. We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion so we don't repeat history. We talk about diversity and equity and inclusion so that generations behind us don't repeat the mistakes. Don't repeat blaming others, scapegoating others who are different from themselves. This is not about hurting anyone's feelings. This is one of the most important conversations that we can have when it comes to how we unite because we believe that each of us has intrinsic value. One of the most important beliefs and values in the Christian faith is what we call imago Dei, made in the image of God. In Christianity, in Judeo-Christianity, similar in Judaism, there is an identification that we are made in the image of God regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of background, right? That each of you have intrinsic value. This isn't about making people feel bad. It's about recognizing intrinsic human value. We also talk about diversity because we are celebrating each other's difference and celebrating each other's unique stories. It's not just about so we don't repeat history. It's about lifting each other up in that human intrinsic value. Diversity here in Iowa is the young basketball star who put Iowa women's basketball on the map. Diversity is the disabled veteran from Dubuque who fought for his country in Vietnam, and then when his neighbors in mobile home neighborhoods and parks started having trouble with big out-of-state corporations taking advantage of them, he fought back for them because they were his neighbors. Diversity is the young black man who worked his way through college and became a small business owner by opening up the very first black-owned nightclub in my city. Diversity is the kid from rural Iowa who received the Iowa tuition grant, becoming the first in his family to go to college. Diversity is naming the reality in front of us. We are different, and that is beautiful, and there is cause to celebrate. We do not have to be afraid. What this bill does, erasing diversity, is erasing our very story. It's erasing the story that makes Iowa so beautiful. This bill is deeply, deeply concerning, and it's deeply harmful. This is a moment in our history that our grandchildren will look back on, and generations to come will look back on. And they will see where you stood today. If you support this bill, you are standing on the wrong side of history. Vote no.
Chair recognizes the representative from Woodbury, Representative Scholten.
Thank you. We've heard from my colleagues and about the diversity of issues we have with this bill, and I want to talk about Iowans with economic disadvantaged backgrounds and the Iowa tuition grant. My father coached college baseball at Morningside College, now university, for nearly 30 years, and nearly 1,000 student athletes he recruited and coached came from all over the country and a few internationally. And if you had the Mount Rushmore of his top players, they all had similar traits reflective of his background. They were Iowa kids, especially from small towns, who came from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And this bill is bad in many ways, but I believe one of the bigger issues that isn't being addressed is the bill has weak definitions. And I find it troublesome that we can't get answers on clarity for some of these definitions. So my understanding is that if something on campus is deemed to violate this bill, a potential outcome is that that particular private college will be ineligible to receive funds for the Iowa tuition grant. So if something happened on the other side of campus, the whole campus is impacted by this. And so on the other side of it, this bill allows any person any person to report a violation. So someone who may not like the college or is from a rival college or someone who has a political motive, they can all report a violation or a potential violation, and they can do it over and over and over again, wasting everybody's time. These definitions are very loose, and I find it disgusting that you're willing to cut funding for low-income Iowans who are just trying to better their lives and better themselves for a political game. This bill will widen the gap between the haves and the have-not, giving the haves more opportunity and limiting the have-nots. Because I believe in giving opportunity to low-income kids, because I believe in diversity, making our state better, because I believe in equity and fairness, and because I want inclusion in Iowa, I'll be a no vote. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the representative from Johnson, Representative Jacoby.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, would Representative Stone yield?
Will the gentleman yield?
I will not.
Okay. Interesting. You'll yield to a white male. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
State your point.
Rule 10.
Approach the wall. Representative Winchell, your point is well taken. The chair recognizes the representative from Polk, Representative Johnson.
Mr. Chair, my esteemed colleagues, you probably guess I've risen in opposition of this bill. Diversity, equity, and inclusion seems to have us all tripped up today. 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education. In this very body, there were 99 elected members that sat in these seats. 96 of them were Republican, 3 were Democrats. During that period of time, they voted to make sure that the Brown versus Board of Education decision was actually enacted in Iowa before it was enacted anywhere else. And that was a body of 96 Republicans and 3 Democrats in 1954. Throughout our state history, Iowa has literally been a beacon of leadership. We have led the way. We've led the charge in a lot of things in this country. We put the first black man, the first black lawyer in the Bar Association in Iowa. That happened right here in Iowa. We started the National Bar Association with Gertrude Rush right here in Iowa, actually right here in Des Moines. We have the opportunity to set forth different moments. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not bad. Let me be really clear. This isn't about excluding anyone. As a matter of fact, this ain't even about feelings. Let me give you some numbers. If you want to know the facts on this, diversity, equity, and inclusion has helped more women, more veterans, more people with disabilities than anyone else in this entire state. When we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have to remember the impact that it's going to have, not just right now during this vote, but for the generations that will come, for the 11-year-old that sits in the back, for my 3-year-old that's at home. We have to remember the impacts of what will happen when we enact opportunities like this. So, I'm not going to stand here and pontificate long. We've been here a while, I know. But I want you all to understand this. To dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion is dismantling the progress that we have made as a state. It is to tell our children that their potential is going to be limited just simply because they were born in a different place, or that their talent may not matter because they may not get considered, whether they are a woman, whether they are disabled, whether they are a person of color. If you don't know, white men have benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me tell you how. There's this thing called first generation when you go to college. There was a guy right here in Iowa who decided to leave his farm and seek a higher education by going to college outside of the state of Iowa. That qualifies under programs like diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am telling you, this does not solve whatever the underlying issue may be. Doing bills like this does not solve any issues. We want Iowa to be a place that is welcoming. We want Iowa to be a place where people want to come start businesses, where people want to come and actually raise their family. That's what we are known for. Let me close. I'm a preacher, so I get 3 closes, just so y'all know. So today, I ask us, do not move us back, y'all. Allow us to stay on the train moving forward. We can embrace, if there are changes, if there are ideas, let's have those conversations. But do not push us back by trying to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities, taking away someone's job in this state. Let's do this thing, but let's do it together in a way that makes sense. So today I'm asking you, vote no on this bill. I urge you to stand on the right side of this. And I want to reaffirm my commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is not just a policy, but this is a promise to everybody that we serve, that we will enact fairness and opportunities when we support policies like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Stone for closing remarks on HF 856.
Mr. Speaker, House File 856 was introduced on February 11th. The subcommittee was held on February 18th. We passed the bill through committee on February 27th. Here we are on March 18th, and now we have questions on this bill. During a recent phone interview, I was told that members of the Legislative Black Caucus brought up concerns they had on this bill to the Des Moines Register. Do you know how many of my Democrat colleagues or members of the Black Legislative Caucus sent me an email about questions that they had on this bill? How about stopping me before or after Education Committee to ask a question? How about walking across the chamber to have a conversation about concerns that they might have had on this piece of legislation? Well, Mr. Speaker, the answer to those questions is zero. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Collins yield to a few questions?
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
You're in order.
Representative Collins, earlier we had Amendment 1094, which was essentially House Files 854 and 855. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And after committee discussion, how many emails from Democrats in this chamber did you get asking you to sit down to discuss questions they might have had on either of those two bills?
0, Representative Stone.
How many times were you stopped in the hallway, a committee room, or your desk to answer a question that they might have had?
Once after committee.
Thank you, Representative Collins. You know, I could go on, but Mr. Speaker, not one email, not one discussion with myself, one question to Representative Collins on two bills, but now that the media is here, now that the cameras are running, and we're on the chamber floor, we have questions.
State your point. Approach the well. Representative Comp, first, your point is well taken. Representative Stone will conclude his remarks.
So, Mr. Speaker, as an Asian American who has experienced the full gamut of stereotyping, prejudice, and racism growing up in the 70s and 80s in places like Texas and Georgia, I fully understand about what minorities go through. I actually had to experience that sense of prejudice right here in this very chamber my first year. Now, you might ask me, Mr. Speaker, Representative Stone, how do you know you were experiencing that? And to that I would say, because immediately after gaveling out for the day, that representative came over to apologize for leaving me out of all the other newly elected minority legislators. Now, to be fair and in full disclosure, that representative and myself are good friends. We mended fences. But it goes to show you that, in my opinion, the only reason people don't think I'm Asian is because I don't look Asian. This is what's wrong with the ideology behind DEI. Let's first look at what a person looks like, what their skin color is or ethnic background is, before looking at anything else. Mr. Speaker, in the realm of DEI statements, or in the realm of DEI, statements like, you want to see somebody that responds to your house or your emergency that looks like you because it gives you a more sense of ease. Those statements are everywhere in the teachings of DEI. So if you use that statement to try to further promote DEI teachings, then why in the world is DEI necessary within the world of the American Veterinary Medical Association? To quote the AMVA, it's important that veterinarians, team members, and students are equipped with the knowledge and skills to meet the needs of all clients. Well, last time I checked, Mr. Speaker, the clients of veterinarians are dogs and cats and hamsters. And I will tell you that when I take my dog to the vet, she doesn't start shaking in her boots because she sees the vet in the building. She starts shaking because she just sees the building and I'm about to take her in. Now, I'm not a canine mind reader, but I'm pretty sure that she's not worried about the skin color or ethnic background of the veterinarian. She's worried about that needle that she's about to get stuck with. You know, if DEI works anywhere, from businesses to schools to government offices, then it has to work everywhere. Let me repeat that. If DEI works anywhere, it has to work everywhere. Well, let me tell you where DEI doesn't work. The NBA and the NFL. Where are the Asian point guards in the NBA? What about shooting guards, power forwards? Where are the Hispanic quarterbacks in the NFL? What about the linebackers or safeties? Why aren't we screaming DEI in those businesses? Well, you want to know why? Because those businesses are performance-based businesses. Now, I'm a former college football coach who's worked alongside professional football coaches. And I will tell you that coaches could care less the color of your skin or your ethnic background. You have the ball handling skills, you shoot 80% from the field, 100% at the free throw line, and stand 6'6", you're the next shooting guard for the Minnesota Timberwolves. You run a 4.1 40, bench 225 49 times, have a 42-inch vertical and weigh 240, you're the next linebacker of any NFL team. What you bring to the table in skills and mindset, that's what gets you moving forward, not your skin color. You know, in a recent study of college students conducted on a whole host of different subjects, the statistics surrounding topics of DEI should be alarming. 67% of those surveyed agree that their college or university should require that all professors and administrators make statements in favor of DEI as a condition of employment, and that number is 65% when it comes to employers making applicants favor DEI before getting a job. 51% agree that college or universities should require that students, professors, and faculty state their preferred gender pronouns when introducing themselves. 78% agree that systemic racism is a big problem in society today, and white people still contribute to it whether they realize it or not. And if these past few statistics weren't alarming enough, these last two should be. 41% of those surveyed agreed that if someone is using hate speech or making racially charged comments, physical violence can be justified to prevent this person from espousing their views. And 48%, almost half of surveyed college students agree that some speech can be so offensive in certain cases that it merits such harsh penalties or punishment like the death penalty. That is ideology that is being taught to our kids, and it is destroying, in my opinion, our country. When you teach our kids to go through life looking at everything through the lens of color, you end up with statistics like these. Mr. Speaker, a question was asked by Representative Madison during the subcommittee on this bill, and I quote, "If you look around the room, where is the diversity? Just take a look." Mr. Speaker, that exact question is what makes DEI an existential threat to the fabric of our society. How much diversity is enough diversity? There were men in that subcommittee room. There were women. There was someone of African American descent. There was someone of Asian American descent. How much diversity is enough diversity? And by looking around the room in that subcommittee, could you tell that the gay community was being represented? Could you tell if the lesbian community was being represented? How about the bisexual community? Could you tell if somebody was from the Jewish community, Catholic community, the Buddhist community, the Christian community? How much diversity is enough diversity? See, Mr. Speaker, this again is exactly what's wrong with DEI. DEI only wants to look at what can be viewed from the outside and not what a person brings to the table in their skills and abilities. DEI creates divisiveness and animosity towards one another. At the end of the day, we're all the human race, made up of different colors, ethnicities, and backgrounds. And I urge us all to talk to one another, have a conversation, find out a little bit about each other. Don't label someone, pass judgment on someone based on the color of their skin or their ethnic background. And most importantly of all, we have got to stop teaching this to our children. What we're doing is teaching them, before considering anything else, is that their skin color doesn't look like mine, so I have to treat them differently. Mr. Speaker, getting rid of DEI won't disregard or diminish any accomplishment by anyone in the last 200 years. DEI won't get rid of us celebrating Black or Women History Months. Those two celebrations came about in 1970 and 1978, long before the tenets of DEI even existed, and we still taught them in school, and we all celebrated them together. Getting rid of DEI won't keep our history teachers from teaching about the Enola Gay just because it has the word gay in it. Actually, getting rid of DEI will help our nation heal and grow together with one another instead of forcing people to believe that you should be judged by the color of your skin. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And with that, Mr. Speaker, I ask that House File 856 be read for the third and final time and placed on its passage.
The representative from Winnebago moves the bill be read for the last time and placed on its passage. Are there objections? Seeing none, the clerk will read.
House File 856, a bill for an act prohibiting public entities and private educational institutions from engaging in certain activities relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion, creating a private cause of action, and including effective date provisions being enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
The question now is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of its passage shall vote aye. Those opposed shall vote no. The clerk will receive your vote. Representative Srinivas, no. Representative Levin, no. Representative Meyer of Polk, no. Representative Jones, aye. Representative Johnson, no. Of Polk. Have you all now voted? The clerk will close the machine and record your vote. The House will pay attention to the result of the vote. Those voting aye, 60. Those voting nay, 37. Absent or not voting, 3. The bill, having received a constitutional majority, is declared to have passed the House. Are there objections to the title? The chair hears none. The title is agreed to. The chair recognizes the Representative Wills for opening remarks on HF 295.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the Accreditation Autonomy Act. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, good afternoon. This bill simply enhances the autonomy of public institutions of higher education in Iowa by ensuring that they are not penalized by accrediting agencies for adhering to state laws. The best example I can give is if we made DEI programs in our Regents universities against the law last year. If an accrediting agency should come and say that those universities have to have a DEI program, this bill would allow the universities to go back on the accrediting agencies in a civil manner. Those are my opening comments, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Wilburn.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, members of the House. Before I give my comments, I want to make sure it's clear to everyone here. Some of my comments are related to the very formation of the Higher Education Committee, which this bill came through. Mr. Speaker, you had shared with the public, and I believe with the body during your initial address in the beginning of the session, that this committee was created because of a need for a review of higher education. It hadn't happened for a while, so granted, Mr. Speaker, I accept on your word that that's the case. Unfortunately, only one bill related to a review, one, maybe two max, of higher education. The rest opened the door for a lot of bills that one might consider after one does a review of higher education. And Representative Wills mentions this particular bill about accreditation, and the example he gave was if one of our institutions complies with the diversity, equity, inclusion laws that you did here, that legal action could be taken by the Attorney General against those accrediting bodies if they are complying with state law. My main concern with this is that if any institution is at risk of losing some accreditation from a non-governmental entity, that puts the whole institution under a cloud. It affects people who've applied for degrees, who are applied to our institutions, just the potential stigma that a program, for whatever reason, is under review or possible sanction for accreditation. That dissuades people from wanting to apply here. It puts people concerned about who are currently in programs about whether or not they will be eligible to get a job because places are looking, regardless of the profession, medical, mental health, that it's coming from an accredited body. That's my primary concern. I want to address a couple things related to this bill. I did not approach the chair of the committee outside of committee on my concerns on this bill as a member of the Black Caucus because Representative Stone said no one had talked to him or Representative Collins. Representative Collins said one person did. I did not talk to him directly outside the committee on this bill. But Representative Collins, in the media, perhaps on Iowa Press, when I was on an interview with him, said that DEI is dead. If you've drawn the conclusion that diversity, equity, and inclusion is dead, then that's not welcoming me to come and talk to him about concerns about a bill. Representative Stone mentioned that no one from the Black Caucus talked to him, not a one outside. He pointed out that he's of Asian descent. I did know that, Representative Stone. But I did not approach you because of a past experience unrelated to diversity. I did not approach Representative Stone on any of the bills related to diversity, equity, inclusion, including this one or the chair, because of a bill last session. There was a bill related to using computer software to detect a handgun that's not concealed. And the reason was about using some type of standard anti-terrorism certification, which ended up not being the case. But throughout that process, some vital information about the overall purpose of that bill was not shared with me on Representative Stone, and the entire context of that bill changed. I didn't have trust or faith, not based on anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but because of that omission of critical information that both my caucus and the entire body needed to know. That is the reason that I did not approach you, Representative Stone, on that.
State your point, Representative Winchell.
Mr. Speaker, may I approach you well?
You may approach well. Representative Coffers, we approach well, please. Chair recognizes Representative Wilburn. Representative Wilburn, you have about 5 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't do the entire 5 minutes. I just want to go back to the point I was making that if we are concerned about jobs in the state of Iowa, if we are concerned about making sure that graduates of our programs have the opportunity to demonstrate that they are and I believe they are, of the brightest and most talented, not only in the state and the country, then we need to assure that their programs have that full accreditation, and setting up a process in which the Attorney General will pursue litigation on an entity, an organization that's a non-governmental accreditation body, a lot of which are national and potentially international, that's in the end the remedy. Perhaps there's some fiscal remedy that the institutions end up with, but those, in my opinion, it's not a stretch to say that those accrediting bodies will say, well, we're done with the state of Iowa and making sure that their programs are accredited.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Wills for closing remarks on House File 295.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Wilburn, you'll be happy to know that the Regents universities actually like this bill. They look at it as a way to add a layer of security for them so that they don't have to violate state law in the process and yet still maintain their accreditation. Mr. Speaker, I simply move the bill.
Representative Wills moves House File 295 be read for the last time and placed on its passage. Are there objections? Hearing none, the clerk will read.
House File 295, a bill for an act relating to accreditation of post-secondary educational institutions, prohibiting adverse action by accrediting agencies against certain post-secondary educational institutions for compliance with state law, providing remedies and including effective date provision, being enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
Question now, shall the bill pass? All in favor of passage vote aye. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. See your vote. Jones votes aye. Johnson and Polk votes aye. Excuse me, Johnson and Polk votes no. Sorry. Jurdy votes no. Vondran votes aye. Sexton votes aye. Bloomingdale votes aye. Have you all now voted? Clerk, close machine. The House may attention results of the vote. Those voting aye, 65. Those voting no, 32. Absent or not voting 3. Bill received a constitutional majority is declared to pass the House. There objection to the title. Chair hears none, and the title is agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Collins for opening remarks on House File 437.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are amendments.
Will the clerk call up the first amendment?
H1075 by Collins of Des Moines.
Chair recognizes Representative Collins for opening remarks on Amendment H1075.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a strike-after amendment which represents a compromise with the Board of Regents and what I believe is an incredible step forward in enhancing civic education across our 3 Regent universities and increasing the level of intellectual diversity at the University of Iowa. This amendment that will become the bill establishes a Center for Intellectual Freedom at the University of Iowa under the control of the Board of Regents. The purpose of the center will be to conduct teaching and research in the historical ideas, traditions, texts that have shaped the American constitutional order and society. The center will coordinate with the Center for Cyclone Civics at Iowa State and the Center for Civic Education at the University of Northern Iowa to enable academic offerings which may be offered at any of the universities, either in person or online. To kick things off, the center will first offer a course in American history and civil government that will become available to all 3 Regent universities, building on the strong social studies standards established by House Republicans during the last legislative session. Based on market research and student demand, the center may also offer other courses, certificates, minors, majors, and graduate programs collaborating with Iowa State and UNI. Once again, based on market research and student demand, the center will incrementally increase to 5 tenure-eligible faculty members to provide instruction through the center. In addition to the initial course offerings established in this amendment, the center will also offer university-wide programming related to the values of free speech and civil discourse. In order to encourage free speech and civil discourse, the director of the center will have the authority to invite guest speakers to the university on behalf of the center. No later than the end of this year, the Board of Regents shall appoint an advisory council for the center, and the board shall appoint a minimum of 9 members to the council, with a majority of members appointed to the council constituting a quorum. The board should determine the initial length of each member's term, with the majority of the members initially appointed to the council serving initial terms of 4 years, and the remaining members serving initial terms of 2 years. The advisory council will have the responsibility of conducting the search for candidates for the director of the center, and will submit a list of finalists to the Board of Regents, with which the board will select from the list of the director. Mr. Speaker, I believe there are amendments to the amendment.
Will the clerk call up the amendment to the amendment?
H1098 by Jacoby of Johnson.
Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby for opening remarks, Amendment H1098.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Representative Collins mentioned, there's been a lot of discussion going on with the Board of Regents. Well, for over a year, the Board of Regents did not have a student member on that board. This simply says you must have the student representative on the Board of Regents before you make any decisions regarding our great schools. Those are my opening comments.
Is there discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I question whether this amendment is germane.
Representative Collins, your point is well taken. The chair recognizes Representative Jacoby for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules to consider Amendment 1098.
98.
Thank you.
Representative Jacoby moves to immediately consider Amendment H 1098. Division of record been requested by Representative Confers, seconded by Representative Mattson. This is now a record roll call vote. The clerk will open the machine to see if you vote. Levin votes aye. Williams votes aye. Excuse me, Williams votes no. Blom votes no. Rinker votes no. Vondran votes no. Jurdy votes aye. Jones votes no. Have you all now voted? Clerk close machine. The House may attention results of the vote. Those voting aye 32, those voting no 65, absent not voting 3. The motion has failed. Will the clerk call up the next amendment?
H1109 by Nielsen of Johnson.
Chair recognizes Representative Nielsen for opening remarks. Amendment H1109.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This amendment is very simple. This program is an unfunded mandate to the University of Iowa that will cost approximately $1.5 million per year. And since the center can accept private donations and gifts, I think that they should work on making sure that the funding comes from that and not from the students. And so I am asking that the fee or the cost for this program not be passed on to students and their families through tuition.
Is there discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find it interesting that, in my opinion, we had no concern about student tuition fees covering the $250,000 salaries of DEI vice presidents, but now we have a problem funding civic education, for example. I'd urge the body to resist this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Nielsen for closing remarks on Amendment H1109.
Dang it. I thought I was going to get to go to the well. I felt a little left out. But I guess this amendment is germane. I don't even know what to say. We're talking about this, and I don't think that the students and the hardworking families of Iowa who are paying for their kids to go to the University of Iowa need to pay for this program. If the center can accept its own private donations and gifts, then it should fund itself. Self-reliance, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. I think that those absolutely apply to this program here. Mr. Speaker, I move Amendment 1109, and I ask for a division on a record.
Representative Nielsen moves Amendment H1109, requests a division of record. Second by Representative Confers. Is now a record roll call vote. The clerk will open the machine and see your vote. Levin votes aye. Blom votes no. Jurdy votes aye. Vonrum votes no. Jones votes no. Rinker votes no. Have you all now voted? Clerk close the machine. The House may attention results of the vote. Those voting aye 32, those voting no 65, absent not voting 3. The amendment has failed. We're now back on discussion on Amendment H1075. Is there further discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Jacoby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Collins yield?
Will the representative yield?
Of course.
You're in order.
Thank you. If I heard you correctly, this amendment, which was a late drop, Did you actually walk across the aisle to discuss this amendment with me?
No,
Since I was on the bill with you?
I did not, Representative Jacoby. I'll give you
Okay,
that. But I wouldn't say it's a late drop. I believe I filed it Thursday just before we headed out for the week.
Oh, so in other words, you had plenty of time to walk across the aisle.
Well, I'll give you that. I
discuss
should
it.
have done that, Representative.
Well, that's okay. Let's take a few more questions if we can. Now, just for the history of this bill, this was the same subcommittee that we had when we were talking about civil discourse, is it not?
I believe it was discussed. There was a proposal that the University of Iowa was going to advance regarding civil discourse, and that's one of the reasons why it is now included in the bill, is I incorporated much of what they were going to do with the center that's being proposed to.
But we received testimony. In fact, we received testimony from former Governor Branstad. And if it was in the form of a mini lecture about talking to us about civil discourse, and during that lecture he said, the colleges are full of socialists anyway. So is that civil discourse to you?
Representative, I will let the governor's comments speak for themselves.
I think they do. Thank you on that one. We also had a professor there to discuss what he perceived as the inability for professors to get tenure. Is that not correct?
The focus of his presentation was not about tenure, Representative. It was about the lack of intellectual diversity on college campuses across the country, and especially at the University of Iowa.
Okay.
It did come up, though. I'll give you that.
Where he received tenure.
Sure.
So thank you for that. This does look like a national bill, and I'm just kind of reviewing it a bit. Mr. Speaker, I question whether this amendment is germane.
Representative Jacoby and Representative Collins approach well. Chair, Representative Jacoby, your point is well taken. Representative Collins, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend the rules to immediately consider the amendment.
Representative Collins moves to immediately consider Amendment H1075. The clerk will open the machine. See your vote. Levin votes no. Scholten votes no. Bondren votes aye. Jurdy votes no. Jones votes aye. Have you all now voted? Clerk, close the machine. The House potential result. Those voting aye 63. Those voting no 32. Absent not voting 5. The motion has prevailed. Is there further discussion on on Amendment H1075? Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Technically, I think it's still part of the first time.
Okay, just
So
don't go too long because we may have restarted the clock, and
Okay.
I'm keeping it up here, so go ahead.
Well, it should please you. I can't read the darn thing, so, but I did pass the driving test. Would Representative Collins yield to a few more questions here?
Will the representative yield?
Sure, Representative.
You're in order.
Thank you for helping set the background for what the subcommittee looked like and now what we're talking about in terms of the strike after amendment, which would become the bill. So if I heard you in your opening comments, you're looking, is it for equity at the college level in terms of conservative and liberal thought?
We're trying to expand the intellectual diversity of the campus community.
Okay, but by doing that, if I see it correctly, you are developing a separate school or a separate center, I'm sorry, with the new, so we're talking about a separate center within the university, correct?
At the University of Iowa, correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. There's a number of amendments I thought about offering today, but as you heard in the answers, what we're seeking to do with this bill is create a separate but equal department within the University of Iowa. Separate but equal. Where have we heard that before? Was it Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896? Or was it the turning over of Plessy and Brown versus the Board of Ed in 1954? Separate but equal. This isn't new. 1896, 1954. I can only give Representative Collins a compliment. The House Republicans are following Project 2025 to a T and also following the orders from Vice President Musk.
Representative Winchell, say your point.
Rule 10, questioning motives.
Your point is well taken. Representative Jacoby, do you continue to seek the floor?
No.
Is there a further discussion? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Representative Collins for closing remarks, Amendment H1075.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Jacoby, I appreciate the exercise and civic dialogue we had there. I think that's a good representation of the goal of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I've heard the word diversity a lot this afternoon, this evening, but in my opinion, for some of those in the chamber, it seems like diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, it doesn't seem to matter. And that's a problem. This lack of intellectual diversity is especially evident at the University of Iowa, and as shared by Dr. DeCastro, who came to speak at the committee, a University of Iowa professor himself. Looking at just last year, out of the 64 deans, associate deans, and assistant deans, only 4 identify as Republicans. Out of the 25 vice presidents, assistant vice presidents, and associate vice presidents outside of University of Iowa healthcare, only 2 identify as Republicans. And then finally, of the 32 employees working in the University of Iowa President's Office, only one identifies as a Republican. But this bill is not just about intellectual diversity. I know we've talked about that a lot tonight. It's also key in advancing our efforts on civic education. With Iowa State and UNI's Center for Civic Education working together with the Center for Intellectual Freedom at the University of Iowa, we can offer even more academic opportunities for students to engage in civic education and teach Iowa students about how our constitutional republic was formed and why Western civilization has led to the greatest advancements of man since the beginning of time. Mr. Speaker, I move the amendment.
Representative Collins moves Amendment H1075. All those in favor shall say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. That disposes of all amendments. We're now on House File 437 as amended. Is there further discussion? Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Collins will yield 1 or 2 more questions.
Representative yield.
I guess we should keep this going.
Well, the concern I continue to have, and many members of this chamber do, is that not only are we setting up a separate but equal center within a school, but we're also setting up an entity that in and of itself, it can collect donations. Is that not correct?
The University of Iowa Center for Advancement will collect donations on behalf of the center. I know we've discussed this before, but that's no different than the Advancement Center collecting donations for any other department or initiative of the university.
So will those donors' names be made public?
You know, as I shared with you in committee, I believe, Representative, that's already covered underneath Iowa Code Section 22.7, subparagraph 52. Some donor information is protected from open records, such as the donor's estate and financial planning, but mostly that information, from what I understand, is made available public. This will be no different than any other donations the university collects.
And I accept that explanation with the caveat when you create a new board that those rules have to be incorporated with the new board. So I'm just letting you know, in my opinion, that indeed is not in place at this point in time because you're creating a whole new board. But thank you, Representative. Separate but equal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Zabner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. Representative Collins, will you yield for a question?
Representative Collins, yield. You're in order.
Thank you. You mentioned some statistics about the numbers of registered Republicans in different departments at the University of Iowa. To your knowledge, are applicants for jobs at the University of Iowa asked their party identification when they apply for jobs?
That's illegal, Representative Zabner.
That's illegal?
Yep.
And so will they be asked their party identification to work in the Department of Intellectual Freedom?
Of course not. It's illegal under federal law, as I said.
So can you explain how passing this bill would increase the number of registered Republicans in jobs at the University of Iowa?
Well, Representative, that's not the goal of the bill. The goal is to expand the intellectual diversity of the campus. I'm simply demonstrating that there is a lack of intellectual diversity on campus based on the data I shared with you.
So is specifically the School of Intellectual Freedom going to look for Republican-aligned viewpoints?
No.
Is that how it works?
No, they're going to look to expand the intellectual diversity of the campus by looking at the academic writings of these professors or faculty members, some of the things they teach, things like that. We're trying to bring in folks from outside of the typical campus community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Representative Wicknedal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the House. You have to appreciate the irony of this government is going to establish a center of intellectual freedom not more than 10 minutes after it banned the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm really not sure that The Onion could write better parody than what has happened in this chamber today. But it got me thinking of the concepts of political correctness, not the overused trope by the overcaffeinated talking heads on cable media or the outraged buzzwords of so many political attack ads. No, the original meaning of the words that arose in the Soviet Union, where the ruling party's dogma would serve to twist culture and education to teach concepts that only aligned with the political philosophy of the Soviets. Because to me, it seems if there was such a thing as a center of intellectual freedom, that it would be open to introducing concepts, ideas, and political theory from across the political spectrum, and those ideas would be held, debated, and defended, including concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. After all, the very definition of a free society and free ideas, that it's those ideas that should be discussed and not the heavy hand of the government setting curriculum and what ideas are acceptable to the ruling party. Like what we saw in the Soviet Union when Stalin altered records, deleted photos, and erased history to conform to that political ideology. Right now, what we are seeing in America today is an American history being purged right before our very eyes in the name of erasing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yesterday, the Pentagon scrubbed a website celebrating Private First Class Ira Hayes, one of the Marines famously pictured raising the American flag at Iwo Jima in 1945. Hayes was a Native American, and the page had praised him as an example of the contribution and sacrifices Native Americans have made to the United States, not just within the military, but all walks of life. Army Major General Charles C. Rogers, who was awarded the Medal of Honor in Vietnam, whose heroism was lauded by President Richard M. Nixon, was removed from the Pentagon's website and the link updated to show that his medal was a DEI Medal of Honor. Marsha P. Johnson and Silva Herrera, two trans women of color whose contributions to the Stonewall uprisings who were removed from the National Park Service because the only thing that these governments, both federal and state, seem to want to erase more.
Representative Wicknedal, state your point. Representative Wicknedal.
We're not on topic on House File 437, Mr. Speaker.
Will Representative Winchell and Converse approach well? Chair recognizes Representative Wickendall. Representative, you have about 7.5 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find it ironic that we're having discussions about what can be said at the center of intellectual freedom and what the ruling party is declaring as appropriate topics, given our current political climate, given the high-level concept of erasure of intellectual freedom in these United States. I mean, what's next? I mean, is the government going to deport students or force students out of college for declaring their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, as has already happened in these United States? I don't know. This bill is a farce. The center is a farce. This government is a farce. Vote no on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Collins for closing remarks on House File 437.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, a lot of talk about diversity tonight. If you support diversity, if you support intellectual diversity, you'll support this bill. I move the bill.
Representative Collins moves House File 437 be read for the last time and placed on its passage. The objections, hearing none, the clerk will read.
House File 437, a bill for an act establishing a Center for Intellectual Freedom at the University of Iowa, being enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
Question: How shall the bill pass? All in favor, passage, vote aye. Those opposed, vote no. The clerk will open the machine and see your vote. Meyer Webster votes aye. Jones votes aye. Bondurant votes aye. Holt votes aye. Jurdy votes no. Have you all now voted? Clerk close the machine. The House may tentative results of the vote. Those voting aye 60, those voting no 36, absent or not voting for. The bill received a constitutional majority. Declared to pass the House. There objection to the title. Chair hears none. The title is agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Collins for opening remarks on House File 440.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are amendments.
Will the clerk call up the First Amendment?
H 1099 by Jacoby of Johnson.
Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby for opening remarks. Amendment H 1099.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. About 3 hours ago, we listened to some rather impassioned speeches about representation across the state of Iowa in rural and urban areas when we debated House File 786. Now, this is a little test of consistency and balance, a little test of that passion. This amendment says it's time for the Board of Regents to become an elected body and serve in regions and districts in the state of Iowa. Because many areas of this state are not directly represented by the current Board of Regents. In fact, it could be said they're not represented at all because they only report to one person. If we have a duly elected Board of Regents by district, that is true representation. That is truly giving both the majority and the minority a voice in how our state institutions are run. Am I watching to see how consistent we are in this vote? Yes. But more important, let's get a Board of Regents in there that truly supports our state schools. Those are my opening comments.
Is there discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an interesting amendment, to say the least, but I question whether the amendment is germane.
Representative Collins, your point is well taken. The chair recognizes Representative Jacoby for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to suspend the rules to consider Amendment H 1099.
Representative Jacoby moves to immediately consider Amendment H 1099. Division and record have been requested by Representative Confer, second by Representative Mattson. This is now a record roll call vote. Clerk will open the machine and see your vote. Sheets votes aye. Jones votes no. Jurdy votes aye. Have you all now voted? Clerk close the machine. The House by potential results of vote. Those voting aye 32, those voting no 64, absent or not voting 4. The motion has failed. Will the clerk call up the next amendment?
H 1084 by Collins of Des Moines.
Chair recognizes Representative Collins for opening remarks. Amendment H 1084.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this amendment changes nearly every section of the bill, so I would just go ahead and speak to the amendment. First, the amendment requires tuition rates for each academic year to be set on or before April 30th of each year, before the beginning of each academic year, ensuring that as students enroll for college each spring, they know the tuition price they will be paying that fall. Second, the amendment directs each Regent University to begin working on offering at least one work-study program where a student earns their degree while working part-time and getting their tuition paid for by the employer. Third, the amendment directs each Regent University to begin working on offering at least one 3-year bachelor's degree, getting them into the workforce faster and saving them a year of tuition and lost future earnings. And then finally, the amendment directs the Board of Regents to conduct a feasibility study on establishing a tuition guarantee, where a freshman who begins college cannot be charged a tuition rate higher than which they started at their freshman year. The amendment also strikes the 3% tuition cap from the bill, and that's due to the Board of Regents agreeing to adopt as official board policy that annual tuition increases for resident undergraduate students shall not exceed a 3-year rolling average of the Higher Education Price Index. I believe that will be discussed at the April meeting of the Board of Regents next month. Mr. Speaker, I believe there are amendments to the amendment.
Will the clerk call up the amendment to the amendment?
H 1113 by Zabner of Johnson.
Chair recognizes Representative Zabner for opening remarks. Amendment H 1113.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I ask for unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment.
Are there objections? Hearing none, so ordered. Will the clerk call up the next amendment?
H 1112 by Jacoby of Johnson.
Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby for opening remarks. Amendment H 1112.
Barring any objection, I would like to withdraw this amendment.
Are there any objections for Representative Jacoby? Just not on this amendment, Representative, but there may be some. Hearing none, so ordered. Chair, that disposes of the amendments to the amendment. We're now back on Amendment H1084. Is there discussion on the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Collins yield?
Will Representative yield?
Yes.
You're in order.
I think in your opening comments, because I was listening, you said that the amendment changes basically every section in some way in the bill. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you reach across the aisle and talk to me about this? Because
No, I
was
didn't,
on the bill.
I apologize.
Okay. I just wanted to be consistent today. I appreciate that. Well, and sadly, if I look at this amendment, it takes away the things that I valued the most in the bill. For me, that would be the tuition guarantee for incoming freshmen. As a father of 2 college graduates, and one of the college graduates who graduated early against my advice, I think that tuition guarantee was a key component of this bill. Without tuition guarantee, I cannot support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Zabner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I want to read to you briefly about my constituent, Avery Detbarn, from an article in the Daily Iowan. Avery Detbarn knew that she wanted to be a lawyer since she was 10 years old. After watching the popular TV series Law and Order with her mother in rural northeastern hometown of Strawberry Point, Iowa, the high cost of college made Detbarn's journey much harder. When Detbarn applied to colleges during her senior year of high school, she wanted to kickstart her legal career as a Hawkeye. The combination of in-state tuition and proximity to Strawberry Point, just 83 miles away from the town of just over 1,000 people, made the University of Iowa her first choice. After being accepted and receiving her financial aid award letter, Detbarn, now a second-year student studying political science, knew she would still have to cover several thousands of dollars in tuition with private student loans. Despite applying for dozens of loans using her mother, father, grandparents, and her uncle as co-signers, no one in her family had a high enough credit score to qualify for a private student loan. Distraught, Detbarn said she didn't know what to do. Having never considered that she couldn't afford college, Detbarn asked her high school guidance counselor for advice. There was no advice, Detbarn said. It was just, then you can't go to college, which was hard to hear because I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be a lawyer. Ultimately, a distant relative was able to loan Detbarn the money to cover the gap left over after her financial aid for her first year of college, which Detbarn is still paying back. The next year, Detbarn said she was able to get enough scholarships to cover her tuition and fees, but the cost of college still weighs on her. She plans to graduate a year early to save on the cost of tuition. If I don't get a scholarship, I probably wouldn't be able to go another year, Detbarn said. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, when it was announced during the interim that there would be a committee on higher education, I hoped that one of those things the committee would do would look at students like Avery and how to make our universities more accessible to her. Our universities should serve the students of Iowa and ensure that they have the opportunity to reach their dreams. Now, over the last 25 years, we've seen a real change in how we pay for our state universities. 25 years ago, for a student like Avery, about 2/3 of the funding came from the state legislature, and about 1/3 came from her tuition and fees. Over the last 25 years, funding for our Regents universities has remained nearly flat, even before accounting for inflation, which means a real decrease, and tuition has gone up substantially, making it harder for students like Avery to achieve their dreams. This amendment takes out the one thing passed by the Higher Education Committee this year that could help a student like Avery. All that's left is injecting partisan politics into our universities.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Collins for closing remarks, Amendment H1084.
I move the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Collins moves Amendment H1084. All those division of record been requested by Representative Jacoby, second by Representative Confers. This is now a record roll call vote. The clerk will open the machine to see your vote. Johnson Polk votes no. Jurdy votes no. Jones votes aye. Have you all now voted? Clerk close the machine. The House pay attention to results of the vote. Those voting aye 63, no 34, absent or not voting 3. The amendment is adopted. That disposes of all amendments. We are now on discussion on House File 440 as amended. Is there further discussion? Chair recognizes Representative Jacoby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't chew my cabbage twice. If we really are concerned about the cost of higher ed, then earlier in this committee we would have dealt with the atrocious student loans that are at 8.5% and 10% and accept the Democrat amendment that limits it to 2%. I'm a no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Collins for closing remarks on House File 440.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ever since my caucus began working on college affordability last year, in my opinion, the only solution my Democratic colleagues have offered is to throw more and more and more money at the system. And they're wrong. We appropriate nearly $600 million every year to our region institutions, bringing the average state funding per resident to over $12,000. Once again, in my opinion, my Democratic colleagues blame Republicans for the cost of higher education, yet looking back over the last 25 years, the largest tuition increases occurred under a Democrat, Tom Vilsack. Looking back over time, the average tuition increase across our 3 region universities during the 2001 academic year was 7.2%. During the 2002 academic year, it was 18.5%. During the 2003 academic year, it was 17.6%. And then finally, during the 2004 academic year, it was 8.3%. That is an increase of over 50% just over those 4 years. As our presenters shared early on in committee, trying to address the cost of higher education is about like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Even when you give a university more money, and this is across the country, not just our 3 institutions, their budgets continue to climb. This bill, coupled with the tuition cap policy that the Board of Regents have agreed to adopt, is a major victory in controlling costs, providing certainty for our students, and getting students into the workforce even faster, all while saving them more of their hard-earned money. Mr. Speaker, I move House File 440 as amended.
Representative Collins moves House File 440 be read for the last time and placed on its passage. Are there objections? Hearing none, the clerk will read.
House File 440, a bill for an act relating to tuition, degree programs, employment, and related matters pertaining to student enrollment at regional institutions being enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
Question now, shall the bill pass? All those in favor, pass shall vote aye. Those opposed, vote no. The clerk will open the machine. See your vote. Kressig votes no. Jones votes aye. Zabner votes no. Have you all now voted? Clerk close the machine. The House pay attention to results of the vote. Those voting aye 64, those voting no 33, absent or not voting 3. Who have received a constitutional majority is declared to pass the House. There are objections to the title. Chair hears none. The title is agreed to. Chair recognizes Representative Wheeler for opening remarks on House File 787.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this bill is hard to give it a name, whether it's a technical bill or an omnibus bill. I'm just going to call it the Wins for Your Local Superintendent Act, since we're going to title a bunch of acts today. Division 1 will help with the minimum salaries we pass for the teachers. It's going to help the way that we basically put out TSS money, and that'll help them pay for that. The second division provides flexibility in the teacher and paraeducator apprenticeship program. The third will create a risk pool. Schools have been asking for this. They'll be able to utilize funds, work with HHS, et cetera, on students with special needs that get special education weighting. We still have to provide them free and appropriate public education. Division 4, probably one of the things I've heard the most from our superintendents is their frustration with the new job posting system. So this recodifies Teach Iowa, something they've been asking for. I think that they'll appreciate that. And the last piece is a fix for the way that we work the minimum salaries with retired teachers that want to come out and come back and teach. This allows them to take the $50,000 salary as well as continue to have their IPERs. And I'll remind the body, Representative Mattson voted for this in subcommittee. Those are my opening remarks.
Chair, is there discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Mattson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. This is not the first time that Representative Wheeler has mentioned ahead of time that I voted on something in support of it. I'm glad that after what has been a really rough day of debate, there is an effort to get a laugh out of me. So thank you very much. I do, in fact, support this bill. I will say that it does exactly what Representative Wheeler says that it does. I encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative Wheeler moves House File 787 be read for the last time and placed on its passage. Are there objections? Hearing none, the clerk will read.
House File 787, a bill for an act relating to education, including by modifying provisions related to the calculation of the teacher salary supplemental district cost per pupil, teacher preparation requirements, out-of-state placement of certain specified students requiring special education, and the duties of the Department of Education, the minimum teacher salary, and including effective date provisions being enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
Question on shall the bill pass? All in favor is passed to vote aye. Those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. See your vote. Sabner votes aye.